All right, once again, everyone, hello. My name is Tommy Moussis. I'm a customer success manager with Graitec. And today we're going to be taking a look at customizing the drawing templates with Advanced Deal for the plant industry. So we're going to tailor, we're going to do one example. Of course, we don't have time to go through all the necessary drawings to output for a proper general arrangement package. So we'll be taking a look at an example of tailoring one drawing template, probably a plan view, to output in accordance to the oil and gas industry. Now, these sorts of modifications do vary depending on the customer that you're outputting these drawings for. So, and the approach will be for an engineering firm, let's say outputting drawings for, I don't know, let's say Shell or Chevron or a company of that type. Now, we will not be replicating standards for any one of those companies, but we will take a look at some of the ways that we can modify the existing templates to get closer to that standard, or to get a general feel and look for what's accepted in that particular industry. So the webinar overview will consist of creating new customer profiles in the management tools default. So of course, if you're an engineering firm, you're probably not just outputting drawings for one specific company of that type. There might be multiple companies that you deal with and do work for. So we're going to take a look at how we can tailor these standards or replicate standards for multiple companies, control them through the default settings. And if you deal with so many that's not an efficient way to go about it, we'll take a look at how we can copy the databases and utilize a specific database for specific companies on their projects. We're going to be taking a look at managing the dimension styles per prototype or by default. So there's, again, a lot of different ways that you can approach managing your page headers and frames. So for those who are not familiar with Advanced Deal, when we're talking about prototype files, those are your DWG files dedicated to your headers and frames again. And you might want to manage this per model DWG, or you might want to manage this with batch file implementation, so copying all data sets from your server to your local drives when needed. Now, we won't take a look at the batch file implementation. However, you can manage this also through your defaults in the management tools, or once again, copying your prototypes to the model DWG. So we'll be taking a look at that as well. Managing multiple prototypes from many companies, that kind of falls in line with what I previously said. Okay, managing color, line weights, texts per customer. So there's, again, many different ways that you can approach that as well. So we'll be taking a look at a couple examples of that, creating new categories in the drawing styles and processes. So we will be taking a look at, again, creating one process, one drawing template, and managing those categories, mapping images to those categories. Best practices for modifying the drawing styles, do's and don'ts. So I'll be showing you a safe, quote unquote, way of approaching editing your drawing templates so you don't compromise original templates within the drawing style manager. And also managing data sets per customer if needed. So if you deal with so many companies that you rather have them be segregated in different databases, I mentioned this already, we will be taking a look at that as well. So creating customer standards, the most important things to take into account here are the management tools defaults, of course, your CTB files and DWT templates. So those are to be dedicated to each customer, and there's a couple different ways of managing that as well. Typically, these standards, there'll be different line weights, and they might want to have the specific colors from your model mapped to the drawings as well. So Advanced Deal out of the box, or as default, has its own color management that is completely separate from the model. However, we can replicate the model colors into the general arrangement drawing, so we'll be taking a look at that. Prototypes, dimension styles management, and the symbols management. So, of course, for your drawing symbols, you might need to modify the section symbols, maybe the north arrow, and things of that type. So we will be in the weld template, of course. We will be taking a look at how you could set up different standards for those as well. And then the drawing style and process management. So again, creating new categories, labels, creating new model roles if needed to map to model objects. So if those things aren't, or you're not aware of what I'm talking about, you will be taking a look at that later on. Now, just to mention, for the next coming weeks, we have many webinars. Excuse me, I clicked one too many. Let's go back. So we have many webinars coming up next week and previous webinars. So if you haven't taken a look at those, you can always request the videos and content of our webinars afterwards. You can just write us an email for more information. Let's go ahead and get started. So here I have a model. And the first thing that comes to mind when tailoring your drawing styles for the oil and gas industry, or the first thing you should look at is, of course, what are their standards for colors? Now, these can all be controlled with DWTs, and for the general setup, you probably would want a different DWT for each client, okay? Because within those DWTs, of course, you can manage the color layers. Now, in this particular file, I've removed all the standard advanced steel layers, okay? So there's going to be minimal mapping when utilizing specific functions. For example, here, if I create a new section, it will map. I do have a beam color layer in there. However, not all objects like grading and so on will map to original colors, and maybe these line types will need to be named in a specific way to follow their particular standards, okay? So those are the first things that you'd probably want to do, is create the new color layers and create a DWD file for that specific company. And of course, whenever starting a new project, you're going to want to go ahead and use that particular DWT template. So once the colors are configured, of course, then when creating a drawing, it's not necessarily going to map automatically. That's controlled through a management tool's default. So first things first, what I'm going to do is go into the defaults. Here, I'm going to use the filter to type in color. And under drawing presentation, here you'll have the default colors, okay, that Advanced Steel will use to extract a template. So these colors are generalized for hidden lines, object lines, and so on. And why you'd want to have more refinement there is just because your drawings could be quite busy, and they might need different pen weight settings defined for plates versus beams, or depending on the role of the item, if it's a column, rafter, joist, girder, etc., they might want different line weights. So that's why you might want to have more control here in this case. So as default, this is what it would look like. Here, I'm just going to go ahead and create a plan view. So here I'm going to rotate around Z. Let's bring that back here. Rotate around Z, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, create a plan view, and at first I'm going to use one of the defaults, okay? You may notice here at the bottom I have a new category for Graitec templates that have already been customized, but the first example, we're just going to go ahead and use, let's say, a plan view full. Okay. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go here to the output ribbon and we'll take a look at the document manager. I might already have details created. It should be drawing 3. And now here we'll see that it's created the drawing and it's using the default colors. Okay, so if we wanted to utilize the colors from the model, again, we're to go back to that default setting in the management tools. First, I'm going to go ahead and delete all the other drawings that are linked in the document manager. We want to start off clean. And here we're going to go activate that particular setting. Once again, I'm going to load the settings. And we'll go ahead and use that same drawing template, plan view full. Say OK. Now here again, or not again, rather, here we'll see that it is mapping the colors from the model now to the general arrangement drawings. So these are the first steps in order to get the preliminary settings, at least modifying the DWT templates and making sure that default in the management tools is checked to use the colors in your model in your drawings. I'm going to go ahead and delete this file. And now we'll go ahead and talk about the prototypes. So the prototype files, here we can access them by clicking Edit Prototype here in the Output ribbon. And you might notice here I have 3 different folders, okay? Now, again, there's many ways to manage this. You can go ahead and edit the original templates. However, if you're doing these sorts of projects for multiple companies, you probably want to have the specific sizes you need. For example, ASD, Proto, ANSI-B, ANSI-D. By the way, I'm using the US defaults, okay? So you might be used to seeing A3, multi-BOM, and different naming conventions and so on, but it's going to be the same case for the UK default. Now, here, if I go into Graitec, I have 2 prototype files, which are typical for, let's say, that particular customer. What you'd want to do is copy this folder and link it to the project. Now here, I'm just going to simply copy, and I'm going to go into my webinars folder, and here we'll see the drawing DWG, or the model DWG rather, that is being used. If we go here, we'll see a folder called prototypes. Now this folder actually, as default, when you start extracting whatever it is, lists, calculations from your project, drawings, etc., it will create these folders automatically for you. However, prototypes is not one that is common. Okay, now just to give another example of this, here if I create a new file, here I'm just going to apply one beam, apply some part marks. I'm going to go ahead and save it in that same category. Okay, so here I'm going to go to the Graitec webinar folder, and I'll call it test 1. Now that test 1 is saved, I'll just go ahead and create a drawing. So I'm going to modify my UCS. Let's just say create a plan view. And here, if I go to modify, this is where we're going to be able to see if we do have the templates linked to the project. So we do not. Here, we'll just see the shared folder. Okay, so this is going to the C drive. I'm going to bring up that path again. So here we'll go into Program Data, Autodesk Advanced Steel 2019, USA, Shared, Support, and Prototypes. So it's going to this folder here. And we will not be able to see the other categories here, the other file folders that we created for our different customers. So this is why we need to copy them locally. Here, let's go back into that folder. We're going to copy this Graitec folder here. And here we have test one. We haven't created a detail yet, so that's necessary. First, we'll just go ahead and create a detail. Or typically, if you were to extract a calculation or something like that, it would then create the folder. It doesn't matter what the drawing looks like. We just want the folder to create at that same location. So now here we see test one. Now we'll see the database and details. If we extracted a list first, it won't necessarily create the details folder automatically. Okay, however, it's not even needed. We just wanted the initial folder here, test one, to be created. And now I'm just going to go ahead and copy that Graitec folder. Here we can rename it and call it prototypes. Now that that's done, and we have, of course, the ASDT Proto NCD sheet there. If we were to go and create another drawing, modify the settings, we will then see two folders here. One dedicated to the model and one linking to the shared folder. So now here, as opposed to using the default templates, we'll go ahead and preview those. We are now using the client DWG. Okay, so that's one way to manage just the generic prototype files after they've been modified. All right, it's much easier to just copy them locally to the model, so that if you're dealing with two different projects at the same time, of course you can have different settings for or different prototypes linked when you're extracting the drawings, and you don't always have to remember to go in and manually change the prototype files here at this location. Oops, let me go back. So we won't have to go in here, copy, and replace the prototype files here. We can just go ahead and link them to the model DWG. It's much easier to manage this way. Now let's talk about the other things we'll need to manage within the actual file. Okay, so it's a given that you'll want to have a different header and a different look to the frame to replicate their standards. Well, let's talk about the dim style settings in the CTB file. So the CTB file, of course, is going to be dedicated to each individual prototype file. So this is actually pretty easy to manage. Here, if we go to the Page Setup Manager, modify the settings. So here you can have, I don't have this particular one linked right now, but of course you can have all of them linked here, and you can have one dedicated to the prototype file itself. So that's easy, that's straightforward. Of course, if you're using the colors from the model, you'll want to go ahead and refine the plot style table. Okay, so the pen weight settings for each individual color that's linked in your model, that will need to be modified. Okay. A couple of other things. Your dim styles. So your dim styles, you can look at this in two different ways. Okay, you can have a different dim style in each individual prototype file, which makes this very easy to manage in terms of colors, display types, so on and so forth. Okay, so if you have multiple customers, each one have their own specific settings. Here in the defaults, and I mean in the prototype file, and that's again easy to manage. You don't have to think about going and modifying your defaults back and forth per project that you're working on. However, another way to manage this is within the defaults of the management tools. Now, if you go with this approach, you would need to have different profiles set here. For example, here I have the Advanced Steel default, and then here I have the Graitec default settings. And whenever I'm working on a particular customer, I'll have to change them back and forth. And then here's set selection as current profile. I'll have to click on that and update the defaults for them to be used. Here, if we type in or not type in, we can just go here to the drawing dimensioning. You'll see here they're all using the AS_dim_style1 dimension styles. Now, this gives you an idea that you would have to go back and forth and not necessarily rename the ones within your prototype files. Okay, here if I go back, you don't necessarily have to rename these. You can keep them all as dim style 1, but then manage, if needed, the different naming conventions here per profile. However, if you keep everything the same, for example, if I did not have this additional information there, I'll just go ahead and delete this. And leave it as what would be the standard name here. Okay, let's say it was all AS_dim_style1. Same as what we would have here. Oh, well, that underscore isn't needed next to 1. So I'll go ahead and remove this. I still do not have to worry about changing profiles technically because it's utilizing the same name. And due to the fact that these settings are local to each prototype file, I can just make sure that the name is the same in each one, and I won't be required to change the defaults. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing to explain this way, and I'm jumping through a bunch of different dialogues, but it's always most simple to just copy the prototype file to the model and leave the naming conventions of your dim styles and prototype file the same. So even here, I don't have a dedicated Graitec prototype file name. I leave that generic because when I copy it local to the model, it will also utilize the model DWG for the prototype with my processes, my drawing processes as well. So I'll give an example of that. Here, we'll just go ahead, close this, save the changes. Now I'm not sure if I made those modifications to the file that was local. Let me just open that up quickly. All right, so here, again, we need to copy that prototypes category back in here. And we'll make sure that the dim style is set in the same way. So now here we'll rename this. And save the changes. All right, so let's give an example of running a process now that the prototype is linked to the model DWG. Here we'll go ahead and apply camera so that we can utilize that process. Here I'll just place a camera at this location. We'll apply some restrictions, front and rear of Z. And here I'll go ahead and select a style. We'll just go ahead and use the, yeah, let's put this a little bit higher. You probably can't see the user category. And I'll use a plan view full template again. I'll leave the scale as is. And here we'll just base it off a selection. So I'll go back into my processes and I'll utilize a camera template. And here we'll base it off a selection once again. I'll use a D-size sheet and say OK. So of course, the selected camera's page full entity defaults to a D-size prototype template. If I were to use another one here, it would probably go back to the shared folder. Okay, so keep note of that. If you try to use, let's say, a B process or something other than the size of the file type that you selected, it probably won't work. So if we show the camera detail, we'll see that it is using that prototype file. Okay. Now let's talk about the drawing symbols. Okay, so the drawing symbols, when we're saying that, of course, here, let's close this file. We don't need this test file anymore. When talking about symbols, of course, we're talking about the north arrow and other related symbols that can be in the file, such as section symbols that we can apply and things of this type. So how do we edit those? Let's go here and find that particular folder. So I'm saying folder because it is a whole folder that holds many of these different symbols. Now here we're to go back to the C drive, program data. We're to go into Autodesk Advanced Steel 2019, USA Shared Support, and then symbols. I'll go ahead and click on the pull down for the tree so we can see its location. And here you'll not only find symbols related to the actual drawings, you'll find the 3D solid shapes, okay, that can be inserted as special parts and that map to some of the railing or some of the Power Pack and BIM Designer for stairs and railings functions with Graitec. Of course, Autodesk gives you various 3D solid shapes as well as default with the installation. Here we'll just go cycle through a few. I think it'll be easier if I just scroll down. Okay, so here we'll see some cut symbols. Okay, so if you needed a different representation type, more of an architectural display type for your section symbols, here's where you can change that. Of course, you can change your compass, arrow, your leaders for your callout views. Here, if we scroll down to, I believe it's here, we'll find the level symbols. Here you'll find the level callouts as well. Here they call it height coat, okay? And here, if we scroll down all the way towards the bottom, you'll find your weld template as well that you can modify. And with the weld template, I mean, all the welds are already there. You might need to modify the text style. And of course, how you can change that is just directly within this this file. If you type in style, you can change the default mapping of the font, height, and things of this type. And of course, anything to do with color and general size, you would need to manage the layers, make sure all of them are active. So here we can go into the layer properties. Must make sure all of them are on here. To give a quick example. So then we can scale up or down all the symbols involved with this template. So those are the basic things that you need to modify. First, of course, your page header and frame. For those of you who don't know, those are managed with intelligent blocks. Okay, I won't go through that because we'll be short on time if I do. But here, if we just type in purge, we'll see those blocks here, the hypersteel page header, and then here we'll see the hypersteel page frame. Okay, so this block should actually not be exploded. I probably just didn't save it or recreate it when I modified this header. But here we'll see the hypersteel page header and frame. We got to make sure those are active. And that's pretty much it. That's how you set up a standard for a customer and some of the intricacies. All right, let's take a look at creating new categories and styles. So here we'll see the Graitec categories. Okay, now I'll go ahead and replicate that. The next ones I'll call Autodesk. So the first thing to do when creating a new category, or when you come to the realization that you need to create new drawing styles, what you should do here is go under the Drawing Style Manager, and then here under your user category, you can create a new category. So here we'll call it Autodesk. Now, at first, you won't see a pull down here. That's just because there aren't any drawing styles linked to this category. So what we can do is go ahead and select one. Here we can start off with a plan view full. Okay, so we'll go ahead and copy. Never deep copy. Okay, so this is quite critical. If you use deep copy, it'll copy every single variable within your template. Okay, and over time it can create a lot of clutter, and it can create difficulties with management in migrating your settings from one version of Advanced Steel to another. Okay, so it's really hypercritical that you do not use deep copy. Always use a regular copy, and then just manage all the entities linked to the specific drawing style. Okay, so when I'm talking about manage, I'm talking about renaming your templates so that nothing is hindered with your default templates. You'll see what I mean in just a bit. So here we're going to go ahead and name this Autodesk. And now we'll just take this drawing template, drag it, and drop it into the Autodesk category. Okay, so that's the first initial step, just making a simple copy of a template, creating a new category. Now we'll take a look at modifying everything that's linked to this drawing template. So you notice here the view name, plan view full, and the object presentations, label strategies, and the direction of the model box. These here are not adjusted. They are exactly the same names as plan view full that I just copied from, meaning that if I were to go into this drawing style and edit anything with the object presentations, or labels, it would actually make the changes, the same setting changes with plan view full. They're still linked together. So what you want to do first is go through and rename all the entries. Now, you don't necessarily need to rename the view direction and model box. If you make an adjustment to a plan view so that it reads 4 feet above and 4 feet below, it's not necessary that you go in and create a new one, let's say. But with the view name, the composition of the view, you probably want to create a new one. So here we're going to call this Autodesk as well. Click on OK. And here, of course, there's the preliminary settings with your drawing template that you can adjust. So the default scale, the clipping properties, the compass position, and of course, the assignment categories. So this is something specific to when you're actually in a drawing. Okay, the assignment category, however, you should keep consistent. So you want this view to be located in the Autodesk folder and not the GA plans and elevations category anymore, because we just renamed it. And I'll show you why in a second. It's basically when you create a section view in your drawing or any sort of call-out view, you want to be able to have that template or that category available. And here we're going to go ahead and rename the object presentation rules. So we're going to create a new one here, and we'll call it Autodesk. Oops. And there we go. Those are the first steps. Now I have my new category, my new drawing template, and everything within the template is renamed so that it does not link back. Of course, here, just to give you the basic layout, if you're not familiar with the drawing styles at all, okay, these categories on the side, model objects, label strategies, and dimension requests, these are all subcategories to the drawing style. Okay, so model objects will be found here. Okay, so model objects and label strategies are linked into this table for object presentations, and then here dimension requests, of course, are linked to the view dimensions. So you have dimension request strategies, okay, and each individual dimension request can be found here. So if we click on the pull down, you'll see the exact same list available here. So that's the first thing to know, is that these categories are subcategories to the overall. All right, now that we've created our category, we'll just go and template, we'll go ahead, hit apply and OK. And we'll do the same thing for our processes. So now here we've just accessed the process manager, and we want to go and create a new category. So here we'll see the Graitec category, and what I'll do is do the same thing. I'll copy the camera category. So here we'll call it Autodesk. Now here we'll just copy one of the camera templates. So here we'll use the D size. So all cameras, page full LCD, and maybe the selected one as well. So here, once again, never deep copy, only copy. And here we'll rename this Autodesk. Now we can just drag and drop into the new category, and keep in mind it's the same thing. Here we have to rename the main step, all right, and we also probably want to rename the drawing style, detail style maps. This I'll talk about a little bit later. Well, let's go ahead and create a new step. Call it Autodesk. Now we change the category as well. So once we hit apply and OK, now notice here we do not see the new categories. In order to see the new categories, what you'll have to do is actually close both palettes, okay? Then close and reopen the software, and then you will see the new categories. But of course, we want to take it one step further, and we want to add imagery to these categories. So where can you add the images? Well, here you can access the table editor. The table editor links to all the data set, to all the databases on the back end. So we'll open the table editor. Of course, you can manage these with, if you have an SQL database tool to view the categories and manipulate them outside of Advanced Steel, you can do it that way as well. However, here we could just load all the tables, all right, and manage them through this interface. So this is what we'll do. Here in the filter, what I'm going to type in is categories. And we'll find the categories here in the Aster Current add-in. Now, the Aster Current add-in holds all variables for your drawing styles and processes, okay? Well, I shouldn't say all, but most, okay? Because some variables here you can find in the Aster base, like model roles and model objects and things of that type. We'll just ignore that for now. And here, if we go to DT base categories, here we'll see the new one for Autodesk. So I already have some logos created. Here, let's go to the webinar, and I thought I had them saved here. They're probably already at this location. If I go into Advanced Steel 2019, USA, Steel, Support, and Toolbars, yes, we already have them here. So these are PNG files. Of course, you can use other formats as well. It's not hypercritical. So here I have an inactive logo and just a regular logo. So I have two, is just so that, of course, when you're not in the category, it could show in a grayscale, and then when you're in the category, you could show colors. It just facilitates knowing which category you're in. It's not necessary. You don't need to do that. But here, what I'm going to do is just copy the text and then paste it here. And here, Copy the text and paste it here. Now, another category we want to replicate this for is here the process category. So detailed process categories, we can apply the names here. And here you might want to change the owner text. It's highly unlikely that in the new release of Autodesk that they'll put a run name or a category name the same as the one that you've created, like very highly unlikely. However, you can put your owner text here if it's my company, or you have your defaults named as something else, so that you know when you're mapping or converting your tables from a previous version of Advanced Steel to the next, you know that it will transfer, okay? So you could just put that there. It's not critical, once again, but it's something that you can do. So there it was already established. Now, what we can do is close this. We're going to update the defaults. Close. Here we're to save the changes. It's not 100% necessary. I don't think I modified anything critical. And now we'll go ahead and relaunch Advanced Steel. And I'll select the United States country settings. And we'll go ahead and reopen that model. So I'm going to go back into the webinars folder, reopen the DWG file. Now here, if I open up the drawing styles and process palette again, we will see the new category and the logos here. So now we have our categories for this particular customer setup. Let's take a look at actually modifying the drawing template. So a common need for the oil and gas industry is, let's say, to represent the railing systems as just basic lines. Okay, of course, from company to company, it does vary in how they want to represent their beams or their cross sections, let's say their columns and so on. Single line work is common to avoid clutter. However, in this example, we only have enough time for editing one object, so we'll take a look at how we can just change the naming convention for the railings and possibly remove some of the clutter with other part marks, and change the label structure for the railing system as well. We'll go ahead and do that. Now here, we're going to go to the new category. Click on Plan View Full. Now here I'm going to select all the objects that I want to be displayed. Right click, and here we can go ahead to modify if we wanted to and use the prototype file that's linked to the model. Now you may be wondering why it asked me to select the objects as opposed to just selecting the view based off of 2-point selection. Well, that's a default setting that you can modify. In some companies, in order to avoid showing too many objects, if there's a lot of clutter with supports underneath and so on, some companies like the approach of selecting the objects required as opposed to just windowing based off a 2-point selection. Those settings can be modified here. So if I wanted to make this change and I just want to apply based off the detail box with XREFs, let's say if we have overlays and so on, we can just do that here. Say apply, okay, and the next time I create the drawing, it won't be won't be active. I think another thing to show as well is whenever you're making changes of this type on the fly, you don't necessarily have to go back to your palette to reuse the template. Here, if you hit apply and then click on use as opposed to OK, it'll actually commence the process for extracting the detail. So here I can go back to the model prototype, and now here, notice it did not require me to select the objects. I could just, based off a 2-point selection, and extract the detail again. All right. So now here we have 2 different examples, or 3. The other one was from the previous extraction. So here we'll see the railing system. We'll see many different labels active, and we'll also see the part marks linked. So keep in mind, this if this was an engineering firm, you're outputting drawings for, again, let's just say Shell, Chevron, Exxon, whatever the oil and gas company is, they probably wouldn't want to see part marks. It's probably just the labels themselves. So how can you manage this? Well, there's actually a whole list of category or a whole category of labels just linked to the actual section name and not utilizing the part marks. So this is probably the first thing you want to change to refine your template. Here, let's go in to the object presentation and label strategies and make this change. So as opposed to using mark and name, maybe I just want to use name. Now I'll click on the pull down menu here. We'll go to the beam category and just use section name. Now here we see mark, name, and alignment, so there are variables for that as well under beam. So here we'll see section name and alignment. You probably notice as well that there are other variables here saved for different callouts. So if you want a new variable altogether, let's say for railings, as opposed to actually showing the section name, you just want to display it as HR for handrail. That's something that you can achieve. You can just copy a label, edit it as you wish. Here I already have a variable created, so just to shorten the process. So here, let's just go ahead and put section name. And here there's a lot of others to configure. Okay, so I'll try to be as quick as possible. So here we're going to go ahead and adjust the beam template. So here, mark and name at 45. So we want to use section name at 45. Go back. Sorry about that. Jumping around quite a bit here. Section name and alignment. And we probably don't need to change all of these. I don't believe there are girts and purlins. Let's just, in this template, let's just go ahead and change the bracing settings. Oh, this one should have been at 45. All right, let's just change that for now. That's good enough. Now, actually, main part beam is going to be critical because there's a lot of beams involved. We'll just, so we see an actual visual change here. Change this as well. And you might be seeing you might be wondering why there's 2 main part beams. I'm going to explain this in depth in just a moment after I make these few setting changes. All right, that's good enough. Now here, if I hit apply and use while I'm in the template, this is an easy way to see the modifications that you made without having to recreate the drawing. So if you hit apply and use, you can just update your detail, see those changes, and see if that's what you wanted. If not, you can go back in and make the other change. For example, here I see that the The plates and columns haven't been modified to my liking, so I might need to go back in here, make another revision for plates, so we could search for that particular model object. Now here, if we scroll down, we'll see main part plate. So this probably needs to change here instead of using mark and name. And go here to plates and just use plate name. And then we'll see that change here. So let's say we want to turn a few objects off now. For this instance, or for this example, let's say I didn't want to see the bolts involved. I didn't want to see any bolts in my plan view at all. What we can do is turn off an element in its entirety. So here we have the presentation types. And here, when you see visible hidden system, this means the type of line work that will be linked to that type of object. So here the allowable lines are visible lines, hidden lines if it's behind an object, and the system line will show as well. If I scroll down to bolts, here we'll see bolts are set to visible hidden. I can just simply go here and turn them off, hit apply, use. And we'll see that update really quickly. Now, if you wanted to represent an object as just basic line work, how would you go about that? So here, for example, the railing, okay, I might want to just show that as just simple line work again, not a true solid shape. So here, in this case, you'll see railing groupings, okay? So railing all objects group 1, group 2, and group 3. Now, we don't know what are within these groups. We just know that there are 4 actually. So here we have the main part. The main part is typically the grab rail. And this is where you have to go and investigate the model, because in some occasions it could be the kick plate that is the main part of the assembly. So kick plate, I'm not sure if that gets utilized in the UK as a name, but when I'm talking about kick plate, I'm talking about this down here. Okay, this flat bar. It could be kick rail, sure. But here, this is where you have to do some investigation on occasion. You might want to see what the main part is, if it's a kick rail or kick plate, or if it's the top rail system. Now, going back here. First things first, we definitely do want for most objects to be turned off. Okay, so we might not want to see the posts. We might just want to see the top rail just shown as a basic line or a phantom line of some sort. So here I'm going to go ahead and actually turn these other objects off. And if you're ever wondering what's in a grouping of model objects, you can always go here to the model objects category and investigate that. So here we'll see stairs, railings, and ladders, or actually that's just stairs and ladders. Here railings are just below, excuse me. So here all objects grouping 1 will see the types of model rows that link to this model object are rail, base plate, landing, and so on, elbows, stair, end stair. There's a lot of model rows linked here. And for those of you who don't know this concept, okay, and this is the first time you're taking a look at the drawing styles, model rows link to model objects. Meaning that here, if we double click on an item and we go under the naming tab, here we have the model row. The model row governs the prefix as well, and most novice to intermediate users of advanced steel understand that when selecting a specific model row, when you run your numbering, it'll allocate a prefix. However, it controls a lot more things than that. It controls which drawing style when running a drawing process will be utilized. And it also controls many different aspects on the back end of your drawing styles, how it will present, which label it will attach to it. Everything is connected with the model row. So it's one of the most important things when building a model in advanced steel to keep in the back of your mind. It's truly the model row. So going back here, let's go ahead and make the test. So we want to turn these objects off. Hit apply and use. Now we haven't seen any critical changes here. Okay, we did see this portion get modified. So here we see the end rail Okay, however, it stayed an object line. That's because you might have noticed that the object presentation previously was just visible. So if it's just set to visible, that means no hidden lines won't show. That's why we didn't see all the vertical posts as hidden lines, because the main part rail system was just set to visible. Therefore, all hidden lines behind it will not show. And this works in sense of hierarchy. Now, let's take a look at modifying this to be just a single line. Apply, use. And now we'll see just a simple line, okay? Now you may be wondering, how did it choose that phantom line? How is that phantom line mapped? Well, you can control that in a couple different ways. Here, if we go into the actual object itself, or the object presentation itself, excuse me, here you can control the line type here. So it's actually using a center line and not a phantom line. Well, you can just choose phantom line here, okay? Or what you can do is actually control the single lines here as well. So you can control the color, and you can choose the model color as well. Here you can turn it off. A couple different variables that you can do there, okay? But that's just the color. In terms of presentation, here, if you did not want to choose this specific line type, if we go back into the defaults, this can be controlled here as well, depending on what you're utilizing. And also, you can have a variable. Sorry, let me make this less confusing. I'm going to go back here and show you that you do have an option here for by layer. Okay, so if you're to use by layer, what that would do is truly utilize the layer in your model. Okay, so the layer here, or whatever line type is managed to that layer, can be changed. And of course, if you're changing the line type layer here to phantom, if you're in 2D wireframe in your model, it will show as phantom, okay? However, this will be removed if you change the display type to conceptual or X-ray or whatever it is. But in 2D wireframe, it will show as phantom as well. But that's another way to manage the line types that are linked. Okay, last but not least, let's take a look at how we can modify your labels. So if we go back here to the object presentation, so we have the main part railing now, it's set to single line. Let's say I want to use another default. So here I'm going to use the Graitec handrail new. If we go under the label strategies, here it's a little bit difficult to see, but here you'll see HR. So it's just set as handrail. We're just showing as a prefix. Now if I click on use, select this here, we'll see that modification as well. If you want to turn off other objects in their entirety, for example, the cage ladders, those sort of things will typically be in groupings like this here. And again, the main thing here to note is that whenever creating your new categories or editing a template, I think that the most important thing to take away from this session is that you want to rename absolutely everything that's involved so that it doesn't link back to the original drawing templates. Now, run out of time. We can go ahead. Let's have a Q&A session. So if there are any questions, don't hesitate. Feel free to ask. We'll leave about 5-10 minutes for this. Any questions at all? There should be a chat portion that you could write into, or something of that type. All right, so I don't see any questions. However, if you do have any questions, you can, of course, write an email to us. We'll be glad to help out. And again, for those who didn't see the slides at the beginning, we have previous webinars that, of course, we've recorded. And if you request any of them, we can send you the videos and the attachments that are involved with the webinar. And thank you very much for joining. Have a great day.